Hi, you're listening to audio by the Vive. For more info on how to get connected, tap the link to our website or Instagram in the show notes below.
I'm Jack West. I'm a counselor here at Silverdale Baptist Church. I run the Care and Counseling Ministries. We've got an incredible lay counseling ministry. We've got groups. That's my role. Who am I with?
I'm Mychelle Pinkerton. I'm Director of Counseling Services at Silverdale Baptist Academy. We focus strictly on the mental health side of things for the students and parents.
Can you believe student ministries let us have this conversation? Just like whatever
out.
we want to talk about.
I know.
Not really. We're going to talk about doubt and anxiety. How about that?
Let's do it.
Okay. So, Mychelle, I'm going to kind of tee it up for you first because you deal with kids on a daily basis.
Sure.
I come at it mostly from the parent side. We work with kids, older kids. So I've got a dog in this fight, as they say in the South.
Mm-hmm.
But I want to start with you. What are some of the things you're seeing in the realm of doubt and anxiety? And maybe we could start with some definitions, but and then what are you seeing?
Yeah, sure. So with doubt and anxiety, there's a spectrum. You start all the way from generalized kind of anxiety. It shows up maybe with test anxiety, or you're entering into a new situation. Maybe you just transferred in. You're not really sure who's going to be your friend group, all of those. So you might experience some little bit of anxiety with that. It might show up as like butterflies in your stomach. Your chest might get a little tight. Your heartbeat's going a little fast. But then once you kind of settle in, it just kind of dissipates. Then you go all the way to the other end where you're experiencing what people would call like an anxiety attack or a panic attack, where the alarm system in your brain has completely hijacked your system and your heart rate is through the roof. You're sweating. Your breathing has increased to where it's almost like you're hyperventilating. For some, their entire system just kind of locks up. It's almost like they're frozen and they can't move. And so in the middle of those two kind of anchors, you've got a broad range of things. And it could center around specific things like separating from your parents or being in a social setting to like test. We see test anxiety a lot.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I come from it, obviously from the family side, so I'm seeing adults, and it's what's interesting about adults and parents. We're talking about parents, right?
Sure.
Is that, as we know, adults have their own anxieties. They have their own things that they're concerned about and fears and doubts that they have. And what's I found fascinating is how their kind of individual or sort of couple dynamic can kind of almost like filter to the kids. Because I think of it as sort of like a weather system in a home. And the parents are kind of like, they set the weather, right?
Yes.
They're the dominant weather system. You could even say dad's kind of like, usually dads are kind of the dominant, and then mom comes along and kind of, they come together, but they provide this atmosphere, so to speak.
Yeah.
And when they're struggling, like if they've got like, maybe dad's got a big thing at work or mom's got some big sales meeting or something like that going on, that even those sort of normal instances can kind of create some stormy weather. And I find that kids kind of like experience some weather in their own lives and they can kind of take that to school. And
yes.
I mean, do you see that like sort of family systems coming together and then kids coming to school with what mom and dad kind of, in a sense, shared with them?
Yes.
Shared in air quotes, like,
yeah.
Yeah.
Or even what they're sensing or observing between mom and dad. Because kids of all ages they absorb. Right. And so sometimes what they're witnessing, they may not have the vocabulary or even access to the parts of their brain that will help them accurately interpret what they're seeing.
Mm-hmm.
And so they create their own story around it.
Right.
And so using that example of like maybe dad, there's stressors at work. And so dad's a little bit more on edge at home, which causes some tension between mom and dad to where maybe they're a little snippy with each other more than what they typically would be, but now the kids are seeing it.
Mm-hmm.
And so the kid not understanding or not even knowing that dad's work is just a little stressful right now is going, parents are arguing more. And I've got a friend at school who, when their parents started arguing more, they divorced.
Mm.
And so now my parents are probably going to get divorced. And so they start to behave and act out that story that they're playing in their head. And so at school, it may show up as the student is now a bit more moody, or they don't want to be separated from the teacher. But it's all from what they're experiencing at home.
At home, right.
Mm-hmm.
And I've even seen it as a two-way street. So sometimes I'm talking to parents and they're struggling because their kids are struggling. So maybe their kids are struggling at school with grades
Yes.
or friend group stuff or, teenage things, which you guys listening to this, you know what those are. I mean, and so your parents care about you and your struggle impacts them. And so it kind of goes both ways, right? And
Yes.
so it's like we come home, you're adding as kids in just a normal way to the weather system. It's just sort
Yes.
of the thing that happens. And what I find usually eye-opening for families is to start to understand how anxiety tracks through well, I'm using the word system, but just the family. It kind of
Yes.
transfers. I mean, just in the most simple way, like if I come home and I've had a rough day and I'm kind of, in my head, and I'm not talking as much. I have younger kids, so my kids are between 8 and 11.
Mm-hmm.
My 8-year-old's she's very perceptive and intuitive.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, and she'll just say, "Dad, what's going on?"
Yeah.
And I'm like, "Oh, now my kid's taking care of me." Oh no, but the anxiety, and I'm using the word anxiety in the sense of I'm in my head, I'm thinking about things, what's going to happen, right? So I'm experiencing some level. I'm on that spectrum you talked about, and then she's looking at me and watching me as all kids do and should,
Yes.
just observing the weather, so to
Yes.
speak, and picking it up. And so now some of my anxiety, even though I'm trying to contain it, is sort of leaking out in just my facial expressions, my general mood.
Yeah.
And if I could see where I do that a lot and I'm unaware of
Mm-hmm.
what I'm doing,
Mm-hmm.
she's going to take that to school,
Mm-hmm.
right? And spread it with her friends or in her classroom,
Mm-hmm.
And in fact, my son, I'd be very careful with him because he and I, like, I have one son, right? So I've got 2 girls and one boy, and he's in an age, he's 9, and he's tracking with me like, he's like right on me when I get home, and
Yeah.
anything I got him comes, and so and we've been noticing him taking that to school if things are difficult or whatever.
Yeah.
Like if we don't have a good goodbye,
Mm-hmm.
in the morning, like maybe I'm not around or like it would, sometimes he can carry that anxiety, like the separation thing, right?
Yes.
And that can show up in his behavior.
Yes. In many ways, right? So it may be amongst friends and they might be a little spicier with their friends. And so now there's distance. Like, I don't want to play with you. And so then it heightens that separation anxiety because, like, I didn't have a great send off with Dad.
Mhm.
Now my friends are distancing. And so that story just continues to spiral
Right.
in the brain. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's good, especially the older you are, if you're a teenager, to know and understand that, that anxiety can travel around your family system because
Yes.
you can wear some, your parents can wear some.
Mm-hmm.
All this is normal.
Mm-hmm.
It's a part of being human,
Mm-hmm.
part of struggling with life because we can plan things like what's going to happen tomorrow. We all have a plan,
Mm-hmm.
but we don't really actually know.
What's going to happen?
We're not certain exactly how it's going to go.
Nope.
So every day brings with it its own level of uncertainty, unknown that we have to face every day.
Mm-hmm.
And everyone's doing that in the family. We're all going out our separate ways, and we've got to face that. So, and doubt is involved in that. I think
Mhm.
one of the things I've observed, is we know if you're a student and you're listening to this, you're in a psychological development stage where things like, I'm going to use the word black and white, kind of
Yeah.
like more kind of concrete
Concrete.
categories and of thinking about things, yes, no,
Mm-hmm.
I'm good, I'm not good.
Mm-hmm.
That's appropriate. That's kind of where we are at that developmental stage. You kind of move into more of the, yes, no, maybe gray-ish area as you get older teen and you grapple with the sort of the paradoxes of life or whatever.
Yeah.
But this early teen stage, we're really like, we got to have it black and white for us. Like, let's just
Yes.
get it nailed down, right?
Yes.
And nailed down means, am I sure? Are you sure you're sure? That, what I mean? And if we're
Mhm.
not, or if we struggle with, am I sure? Then there's like doubt.
Yes.
And then there's that anxiety that comes with that doubt. I think about that a lot in terms of students' relationship with God is the God of the Bible provides us with objective certainty. He loves us.
Mhm.
He doesn't change.
Yes.
And yet there's also this subjectivity to life. Things do change in life. Like we don't know what's going to happen, but we have God out there. We know he's good and he's always good. He doesn't change. But
Mhm.
our lives are always changing. Right.
Mhm.
And
Yes.
so navigating that in this developmental age, what are some things that you've seen in terms of students' relationship with God where anxiety shows up and doubt shows up?
It's what knocks down that everything fits neatly in a box, right? So it's God is good. We know he's always good. He can be nothing but good. I'm suffering in my life. There's really hard things that are going on. Or I'm watching a friend that has to suffer in life. And it's a range from everything from like there's discord in the family till a family member has passed on early. Or I'm struggling with like physical health. I'm having these hard physical health things. Where how does that fit with God is good and he can be nothing but good? And so it's that gray area that they're having to grapple with almost before, like brain development wise, they're ready to grapple with that. So the making faith, putting skin on it is kind of what I say, is that believing that there has to be action to that. Like I am choosing to believe that God is good and he can be nothing but good. It's not going to feel good because these things are hard and it's not going to feel good. And I'm going to experience the discomfort of more of those anxious feelings. Like anxiety does not feel great. Like having butterflies in your stomach is not great. Feeling like your chest is tight or that you can't breathe, it does not feel good. It serves a purpose. Like your body is saying, hey, I need to prepare you because we don't know what's about to happen. And that fight, flight, or freeze system is doing what God created it to do, to prepare you. I'm going to have to fight my way through or I'm going to get on out of here. That's how I'm going to survive, when really what's happening is you're getting ready to take a test, my love. Like, it's fine. So helping them wrestle with, there are going to be gray areas. Do we enjoy them? No, but they do exist and they can serve as a purpose to strengthen our faith because we live in a fallen world, right? Nothing is working the way God initially created it to work. So we have to like navigate that a little bit differently.
Yeah. And if you're a student and you're struggling with that, how can I be sure God loves me? Or sometimes I doubt God's love for me. That's totally normal because, I mean, adults do that, right? So this is, but
100%.
if you're in that, as you're growing your faith as a teen, just know that you're right in the thick of it. You are growing your faith on the edge that is absolutely appropriate for your age. And you're learning that when the ground underneath me shifts and shakes, kind of to put it another way, or, I'm hurting or I'm struggling with anxiety, that God is there and he's constant.
Yes.
And so it's navigating, between my own experience, my circumstances, and the truth, which supersedes my feelings in the moment.
Yes.
That God is love and he is good and he has a plan. Like he's working in this.
Yes.
And if you're at that growth edge in your faith, that's right where you need to be. Like it's good. There's nothing wrong with you. you are on your way. What do I wish it was easier?
Sure.
And that growth edge, just we got through that. I do, but that's where we are, right? And if you look, if you look at all the major biblical stories, I mean, that's trusting God with the future.
Yes.
And what we don't know and don't understand, and trusting in his goodness is where it's all, that's the game, right? So it's navigating, even the ups and downs of a single day at school where you have doubts and anxieties, even about whether you belong in your friend group or whether something's a certain situation is going to work out with your friend, and having to trust that even if it doesn't work out or it's difficult, that God still loves me. Like that doesn't change. Like this friend may change or this situation may not go the way I want it to, but God's still there. He still loves me. And if you can work on that edge, then there are so many things about life that are going to be more joyful because our faith is centered and rooted in something that's beyond our feelings. Doesn't mean that feelings shouldn't be there.
Right.
They actually provide the texture to life. Right?
Yes.
They provide the motivation to reach out to God.
Yes.
Right. So my anxiety is in one sense a signal that, I need to find my footing. Where do I put my footing? We'll put it on something solid. That would be good, like God's truth.
Yeah.
And remember those things. Yeah. So we've talked about families and how that works and anxiety. We've talked about how anxiety can be on a spectrum. What are some ways that you've found helpful for students in the moment, right? So they're dealing with doubts and anxieties in the moment. How do they help themselves?
I always encourage students, you need like your toolbox
Mhm.
of coping skills that you have, a broad range of them, because depending on what the situation is, you may have to use more than one to be able to soothe. Because in the moment, like literally your alarm system in your brain is in control. So we want to go with the basics. You might want to do some breathing exercises, whether that's deep breathing or that breathing from your diaphragm, because that helps calm your heart rate, which sends the signal to your brain that you're not in danger. It's okay. You don't have to run. You don't have to fight your way out. It could be having items that are of comfort to you. So with some of our kiddos, we encourage if small fidgets that are not disruptive to the classroom, because teachers are not fond of those. We get that. But sometimes there is this sensory thing where you have to have something in your hands that helps ground you, whether it's progressive muscle relaxation, where you're working each major muscle group throughout your body that just kind of calms and centers you a bit. Going around the room and kind of grounding yourself, whether it's identifying, 5 things of a particular color or going through your 5 senses of things that you can identify in a room that brings you back to the present. Because anxiety really loves to hang out in the future and loves to hang out in the past. But in the present, it's a little more difficult to find something to grab onto. So if we can bring you back to the present, if it's reaching out to your support people in the school, in my case, the setting that I work in, like who are those support people that you can go to? Sometimes it's just changing the environment. Let's go for a walk. If it's beautiful outside, you need to be in the sunshine. So let's just go for a walk. Within a minute or two, we can get the alarm system to calm down. And now we can talk through kind of what set that off for you. What is it that you're needing, or what is it that you're fearing is about to happen? And then reminding yourself of like, okay, and so here's that story that you're telling yourself that's not based in truth. So let's challenge that with what we do know to be true. And for my students, I encourage them to find a source of truth that is not easy to argue with, right? And sometimes with parents, it's easy to knock down what they're saying because you're like, well, you have to say that because you're my mom. But it's a lot harder if I say, I believe everything that is in the word. I'm not going to argue with that. So let's go through, what does God say about whatever the situation is or what you're feeling in that moment?
Yeah, Tony calls the 3 C's. He says, capture it, challenge it, and then change it on your thoughts. It's a great little, I guess it's an acronym to remember on what we do with those thoughts, right? As they start to run away and the stories that we start telling ourselves overwhelm us. My favorite go-to, I have a couple, I call it the fire extinguisher. So if I'm having a peak, or if I have some of my people that I'm working with have an emotional experience, particularly around anxiety, I have them go to the bathroom and do cold water on their face. Right? So it's the cup the hands, and then over the face, because it really triggers that nervous system to come down, like you talked about, like the heart rate to drop a couple beats. We know that because we were designed, when God designed us to dive underwater, our body immediately goes into oxygen conservation, so it drops our heart rate and actually begins to soothe our nervous system, because it takes tension out of the muscles. So if you have tension in your neck, you'll feel that loosen up, because muscle tension requires oxygen. So it's this little hack to like kind of just give our body a signal, oh, you got to come down. And then I love the breathing stuff. I actually do that before I go to bed. I do 4 square breathing. If I have a little extra anxiety and it's keeping me up, I do 4 square breathing, because again, heart rate, right? It's that marker that sends our nervous system down. So a lot of tools, it's about remembering to use them.
Yes. And sometimes you have to know when to use them. We don't use them when we're already panicking, right? So if you can envision a stress curve, the bottom, the base, 0, the peak of it, let's say, is a 5. We can't start breathing at 5. It's gone. We've lost it. We want to start using those breathing techniques, the progressive muscle relaxation, whatever some of those tools are, when we're going up the ramp. So when we're starting, we're going, oh, I think I'm at a 2. I'm on my way to a 3. That's when we got to do it. And keep at that lower end, because once we go past a certain number, we are off to the races. And there are other tools that we would probably have to use to be able to get out of that space. Because again, when we're in that anxious space, we do not have access to any executive functioning of our brain. We're not going to be able to talk it through. We're not going to make great decisions. We're not going to behave in ways that we're going to feel good about once we're done. So we want to stay at that lower end.
It's about catching it on the rise.
Yes.
Yep. Okay, I think this is a good place to push pause. It's been great.
I think they made a good choice.
Yep.
Mhm.
Okay. See you guys later.
Adios.
Vive is Silverdale for 6th through 12th grade. We gather on Wednesday nights at 6:30 p.m. in Chattanooga, Tennessee at our Bonny Oaks, North Ooltewah, Apison, and St. Elmo campuses. We also have small groups on Sunday mornings at 9:30 and 11 a.m. on our Bonny Oaks campus. Thanks for hanging out.